Hola. Hola, buenas tardes a todas y a todos. Bienvenidas a CFD Barcelona. Es un placer acoger esta mesa Women in Photography con las mujeres de la Agencia VII Photo. Quiero recordar que es un evento que se enmarca en el workshop All at Once, un evento organizado por la misma Agencia VII junto con Eyes in Progress. El evento se inauguró hoy en Casa Golferix. Aquí estamos en un espacio que se llama CFD Barcelona, que es un centro de fotografía dedicado a la imagen documental, llevado por 5 mujeres de forma cooperativa. Tenemos una línea especial en torno a perspectivas feministas sobre fotografía y por eso nos parece muy importante hoy estar aquí debatiendo estos temas. Decir que la charla será en inglés, que habrá un turno de preguntas y comentarios que tendréis que hacer con un micro que tenemos aquí, o sea, os pasaremos el micro, y que estamos también retransmitidos en streaming. Si tenemos algún problema con el streaming, tendríais que nos avisarán y tendremos que parar el wifi o el 3G. ¿Sí? ¿Ya es la hora de hacerlo? Mejor cortar comunicaciones, o sea, si podéis quitar la conexión a los móviles nos ayudará para que el streaming salga mejor. Y sin más, le cedo la palabra a Sara Terry, que moderará la mesa redonda. Gracias por estar aquí.
Thank you so much for having us. We're so excited. And for those of you who don't speak Spanish, you are all just asked to turn off any Wi-Fi connection because we're streaming. So please do that with your phones now. And I'm sorry, I just need to stand up because I want to see everybody way back there. Hi. It's a long, narrow room. Oh, you're all here. Oh, look, there's the men of 7. Hi. Yay, they're back there.
They better be here. Sorry.
Okay, feedback. Oh, is feedback coming from... There you go. So feel free to stand up. We're going to open this up to conversation with you, but we're beginning with a conversation among us. We are really proud to say to you that we are the 7 of 7. It was a nickname that was affectionately given to us by one of our male colleagues early on who said, oh, there's 7 of you. You're the 7 of 7. And we've decided that no matter how many women enter the agency in the future, and we look forward to it, that we as a group will always be the 7 of 7, like 7 Photo Agency is 7. So I wanted to ask everybody to just say their names and introduce themselves so you know who we are. I'll give the microphone here first.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anush Babajanyan, and I'm a photographer based in Armenia.
My name is Ilvy, Njiokiktjien, and I'm based in the Netherlands.
Hi, I'm Nichole Sobecki, and I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya.
I'm based in Los Angeles.
How's that sound? Jessica Dimmock, based in New York. I'm, Maggie Steber, and I'm based in Miami, Florida.
Hi, I'm Bournane Engeiberth, and I'm based in Norway.
So as we get started on this, I want you to know we don't have a script. We have talked about it a lot, and of course we've been living this moment intensely, as so many of us have been. But we, oh, you're making a face, what's wrong? Okay, trust me, we are documentary filmmakers, so when the sound guy is like going, there's a problem, we pay attention. But that's the whole thing. There's nothing that can go wrong tonight. There's no right answers. There's no wrong answers. In these conversations that have been happening around women in our industry and gender and women and men, and boy, do we have class and race and so many other things to come. What we hope to begin by the end of this evening with you all is to say, how can we build a conversation that takes us all forward? So women and men, and I don't claim those conversations are going to happen immediately, or we're not all somebody's going to say something awkward or not get the point, or we're going to need to be honest with each other. But for me coming into 7, the amazing thing was how much love and respect the men of 7 have for the women. And it was this incredible coincidence that as they were bringing in new members, which they hadn't done in 5 years, and they wanted to bring in women, the Me Too movement was exploding. So it was kind of this like, whoa, what a moment and what a time. And And these men have been like, start the conversation, show us the way. They're, for us, modeling what it's like to begin a conversation. So we wanted to share that with you. And we're just going to begin tonight, I think, just maybe reviewing a little bit of this explosive movement, recognizing different points of view that come from different regions of the world, different generations of women, gender. But, I wanted to start, Nichole, with you, just because you've been, I told them not to ever feel on the spot, so like just keep loving us all, that's. But you've had so many, based in Nairobi, your partner is Ethiopian. I'm just curious if you can talk about this whole question. This thing that women have been saying is, listen to us, listen to us. There's things about that to come later, but in this first moment, like, what is that? What is that about?
Well, I think that we're all here as storytellers, and so we're representing half the population as women, and that's an incredibly critical, important part of being able to kind of share our experiences, share our point of view, share our perspectives that's reflective of the stories that we choose to tell, which can cover a range of issues, but are ultimately, we have our own identity and we carry that into the stories that we tell. I think that this is about opening up the space of storytelling for diverse voices. And that means women, that means economic diversity, that means racial diversity, diversity of sexual orientation, and I think, it begins with us all listening to each other and having a conversation that is open to different perspectives and point of views.
I'm going to push Nichole a little bit on this, because so we can speak on some of the tough issues. Women have said, shut up, listen to me. So I want to understand better from how you would explain it, because Maggie Steber and I would explain in a different way, Jessica in a different way. Our generations affect the conversation. But what is this? We've heard a lot of shut up, sit down, stay in the room, but listen to me. So I'm shorthanding it there. But, I'm being provocative. So tell me some more about that, us more. Why this need to be listened to?
Well, yeah, I think that's exactly the right word. And it comes down to the same point about lived experiences and the fact that none of us know, I don't know your lived experience, you don't know mine. And the only way that we can even begin to understand each other is to listen. And far, far too often, I think something that we can all relate to is the idea of being talked over, of not having our voices respected, this goes into hiring practices. It goes into basically every element of what it means to be both a woman personally and professionally. And one of the most exciting things, I think, is one of the points that we want to make here is about how we all move forward is, when you don't understand a part of this conversation, ask questions. And when answers are given, listen, and listen deeply and thoughtfully.
It's not my fault. I don't do that.
Yeah, don't make excuses. If there's parts of this that are uncomfortable, I think that's okay. I think it should be okay to be a little bit uncomfortable. But if you're confused, ask questions, and that's something that is what we're here to do today. And it's also something that I think has happened in my own personal life with men that are very important to me, who are coming from perhaps more traditional backgrounds or just the same background, and saying, I'm trying to understand this and I'm trying to engage. So help me. And I think that's, something that we're all here, I don't expect that me as an individual will understand everything about your lived experience. We don't expect the same, but if you're here to listen, then that's a brilliant start.
I'm just going to tell you one of the more colorful stories I heard on that. It just occurred to me while you were talking, from a young woman photographer who we all sort of know and love. She's quite outspoken, and she has posted somewhere one time, I remember saying, when she speaks to men about this issue of, listen, you're not hearing what I'm saying, or stop, talking and listen. She has said, I understand, I'm so sorry, this is going to sound like a little vulgar, and I don't mean it to, but it's how it was said. I understand that it really hurts when you get kicked in the balls, as a man. Like when you get kicked in the crotch, I understand that hurts. She goes, but you know what? I'm not going to tell you how it feels to you or what you should be doing to feel better. She said, I'm going to listen to you because I don't know that experience. And she used this really deep kind of, earthy, sensual way of saying it. But I think it's that question of you don't know my experience, and just because you're not the man who has harassed somebody, there's something bigger to be considered here, and it's the patriarchy. It's the system under which we've operated for so long. And Jess, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this question, but I think it's yours to handle.
You said you were going to ask me this question. I said, that's not the thing I want to talk about.
You don't have to if you don't want to. I just think you've got a good take on it. What is the break down the patriarchy?
Sarah.
You can pass.
No, it's okay. Here's where I kind of enter that point, which is that, I think that this is about two things, and I think that they're really equally important. Some of this is about numbers, that it's just about what's equitable and fair. It's really important that, we're talking about photography in this situation. Other situations we're talking about being directors or CEOs or being the kind of authorities of storytelling. It's really important that it's equitable. It's important that women shoot the covers of magazines. It's important that there's an equal amount of, or close to equal amount of members in an agency of one gender to another. It's just we're half the population, those things matter. It feels terrible when you're a female photographer and you're like, God, I've been looking through these magazines over and over and over again. I just never see myself reflected in the byline. That kind of takes its toll. So that's one part of it. But the other part of it is that it's not just about numbers. It's about kind of what you were saying, experience and ways to tell stories. And I think, often we get caught up in the kind of unjust part of it, which is incredibly important to pay attention to. But it's also that as a woman, I'm a good listener. As a woman, I'm very intuitive. As a woman, I operate on an emotional level with stories. There's all these things that I do really well because I'm female. And that's part of the storytelling that I'm gonna bring to the table. And if you don't address that, or if you don't kind of allow that in, you're just cutting off a really important part of the spectrum when it comes to storytelling. And that is reflected in patriarchy, which is that if you don't, if you only give one experience authority, then you're also you're limiting the breadth of what is available to all of us in terms of the ways that we're going to tell stories, the types of things that we're going to communicate, and the things that we say are important. There are stories that men gravitate towards more, and there are stories that women gravitate towards more. It's not black and white. I know that there's a lot of crossing over that all of us do, but it's very important that we look at this large spectrum.
Linda.
And I hope after the Me Too movement that there will be some changes, and I really hope in the photo industry it's really important that everybody looks at this. And the first thing is it should be equal in the juries. Photo agencies should look at how many women are we compared to men. Magazine editors, how much are we hiring people? And I think it's important that women really raise our voices. We have to say yes, we have to send into competition, we have to say yes to speak in panels, and really keep this going forward. But it's also important that men includes women. I was in a jury in Picture of the Year in Norway, and I said I will be in the jury if we're the same amount, that we're also the same amount of women. And I think men should do the same.
I just want to add one note in here because it's come up in the conversations. You guys are all making such good points. But the idea of patriarchy, so here's how when it benefits you, when the system defines the world that you already live in, you don't notice that it exists. You may be the man who's never sexually harassed a woman, but that doesn't mean, that means you need to also critique the structure that's allowed you, that you're a man in. I can only explain. I was at a Latino film festival in downtown Los Angeles. There's some big issues around in the Latino communities in LA and gentrification. And I spoke with somebody afterwards who said, oh, I'm concerned that we might be alienating the white population. Hello, that was me. And I said, no, I didn't feel alienated at all. I said, I wanted to understand from your point of view, what the problem is, like why, I might not see what you're seeing. And I said, what can I do, to help? Because I'll tell you, maybe some men can relate to this. I'm a white photographer, female photographer, and documentary filmmaker. There's been a lot of opportunity opening up in the funding world recently for people of color and different gender identifications. And there's a part of me that has been like, I'm not any of those things, but I don't have an opportunity. I'm not getting that money. What about me? That's my deepest, darkest moment. I get, we're human, we think on those things. But as I was talking to this woman at the film festival, I just was like, because I said something to her about this system, about being Hispanic and being white, and I suddenly realized, Sarah, everything's white. From my perspective, and in America, in the majority white culture, everything's white. I don't even stop to think about, as much as I believe I'm compassionate, about what it's like to be the Hispanic person in the room. Or, it's just like, and you know what? I may not have those grant opportunities. Right now, they may be going to people who have never had them, or who certainly don't belong to the power structure that I belong to as a white woman. And I was like, so take a back seat, Sarah. Just, sit down, because I'm going to benefit as those voices come into the mix and we become a more diverse conversation. That was just my little wake-up moment about going, oh, I benefit from being white. And which, intellectually, but it's like, but the world is white. So we also recognize that within women, there have been generational differences. There are geographical differences. Anush, you come from Armenia, and you have other things to say on the conversation.
Yeah, well, like all of us, we do have different points, and this is such a complex issue that really needs approaches from different sides. And definitely thinking geographically also matters in terms of representation of women in photography, because in places like the post-Soviet space, for example, where I come from and where I work generally, there are so many powerful women photographers, and a lot of them are really misrepresented. Many of them who are in Russia, it's a pretty strong network of editors and photographers, and they work together, and that happens a lot. But in the smaller countries, it's still an issue. And so, step by step, this is actually happening and changing because of some women who understand that something needs to be done about it. And an example is a women's collective that I started. So that kind of brings us to this solution. One of the solutions that we discussed in one of our conversations, where it often helps for women who feel kind of that maybe something is not happening. Maybe they want to move things forward and they need support, that to come together to create networks or to become part of networks that exist of women photographers, collectives, or agencies, and really give each other power, lift each other up, and create these fields that don't really exist in some cases. And that's really happening with the Women Photograph Group, which is basically the largest example of what I'm talking about. And this initiative of Daniela Zachman has been extremely helpful to a lot of women who had some questions. Am I going to make it? Am I good enough? Is somebody else over there better than me or not? A lot of the work that Women Photograph does has eliminated this. And so getting together does help a lot of times and changes things to a great extent. Mm-hmm.
In the conversations we had among ourselves before coming to talk with you, we identified some of maybe the sticking points or the places that are causing, issues among women in the conversation. There's a lot of private conversations going on, which I know a lot of you men have heard about or gotten, like who's saying what about this. But I think maybe if we identify some of the things where there is disagreement and figure out ways to talk about them, I think I can tell you also that among women who are a bit of an older generation, sometimes we've tried to enter the conversation or say something, and we have been shut down or felt shut down by younger women. And one of the sagest voices I know on these issues, and we're so happy she made it, thanks to winter storms nearly kept her from us, is Maggie Steber, who, as a woman, I aspire to be. So, Maggie, can you, you are amazing. But can you talk about it, you've spoken so many times about what women can be doing, or just do your thing. Testify, Maggie.
Oh, damn. Okay. Well, I came up in photography when there were very few women, and I was a picture editor. I've been a director of photography. I've covered a lot of stories and conflicts where there were many more men than women. And I found several things that happened earlier on in my career, which was there were a lot of women picture editors. Tell me if I get off track here. Okay.
We're going to get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to that one. That's the second one.
Okay. A lot of women picture editors who would only hire men. And there were a lot of reasons for that. And then because there were fewer women, there tended sometimes to be more competition between women, actually, because that just happens even in nature when there's a lot of male baboons and there's only 3 female baboons. Okay, now I'm getting into trouble. What? Okay.
We get permission to say things that may not make the most sense.
I've had baboons on my mind lately, but anyway. One of the things, in my career, I've been pushed to the ground by men. I've been knocked out of the way when something was happening right in front of me, not a general thing, but something coming from behind and pushing me to the ground. I've had men say extremely untoward things to me, and especially when I would call them on their behavior, where I would see, for example, in Haiti, some people were lining up since 5 in the morning. There were 500 people in line, Haitians, to see a very important event. And I got there early, like everybody should have done. And just a few minutes before the gates opened, these 2 very famous white men photographers showed up and started chatting up the man at the front of the line. And so I could hear, because I speak French and Creole, I could hear people starting to really be upset. But nobody was going to say anything because they were white guys. So I stepped out of line and I went up and I said, hey guys, you can't do this. You've covered wars all over the place. Why didn't you pay somebody $10 to stand in line for you? You're smart guys. And one of them proceeded to tell me what I could do with myself. And the other one didn't say anything. But at any rate, and to the guy who was really rude, I said, really, that's the best you can do? Anyway, so anyway, I got back in line, and sure enough, I was in the first 10, and I got in, and certainly these 2 guys then got in the second 10, and there were 500 people in the line. So to me, it was not only racist on the part of those guys, but it was stupid that they were so experienced and they didn't think to pay a Haitian person $5 or $10, that was a lot of money for somebody. Anyway, it's just one story where I've had things like that happen. On the other hand, I decided a long time ago I'm not a man. I was raised by a woman who worked in a man's field, and I was very fortunate that she taught me how to do that. and that I didn't have to be like a man, but that I could be strong nonetheless, and always take the higher road in things and be professional. So that's what I've always tried to do. But I know also about 10 years ago, I became the director of photography at a major American newspaper, the Miami Herald, and when I went, there were 7 women on the staff. All of them were underpaid. All of them got the old equipment, and none of them got bonuses. And they happened to be the best photographers on the staff. And so I very quickly did some budget checking and looked at their output, and went into the executive editor and said, we have a problem here because all of these women have worked here longer, they're underpaid, their work is far superior, and I showed him this, and he said, well, I hope you haven't been talking to the women because you're a manager and you're not supposed to. And I said, I don't have to talk to them, they know this. And I said, but we better correct it and right away, and otherwise I'm gonna go to the publisher. I wasn't threatening him, I just said, if you don't have the power to do it, let's go to the next person. And within a month, everything changed. But I find sometimes that we women don't think that we have the voice. And especially with younger women, I'm finding that you don't think you have the voice. And it doesn't mean that you have to scream or yell or anything. You have to just be confident in your voice, because you can point out things that are wrong. And if anybody says anything to you, as long as you know that you're representing something that's higher, a higher goal, a higher ideal, then that should be your shield against anything that anybody does to you. And if you can do that, I think that that's what you become known for. And that has a lot to do with being professional, representing what is right in life and what is right in the world. I don't know if I'm going off on a tangent, but I just think we're so much more powerful than we think we are. And I've been a little disappointed lately that some women feel that they're victims. Now, some women are victims, but we don't have to play the victim. And that's what I would say, don't play the victim. Just be strong and brave. Women are remarkable. We're remarkable creatures. We're remarkably strong, powerful creatures, but we have to realize that. And if you behave in a certain way and you present yourself in a professional way, men will respect you. The ones that really count will respect you, I think. So I don't know if I'm going in the right direction.
No, you haven't been. Let me ask a question again for anybody. So I want to be really clear. In some conversations, in some circles, what Maggie just said could get pushback from some people going, oh, you don't understand. Okay, Maggie, you get the patriarchy. So there is the patriarchy. There is the big picture. But Maggie's talking about the tools that we have now as women to be working within the system we're trying to change. And people just cut you off at the knees if you, and Maggie has fans calling. But they cut you off at the knees if you only say one thing, So I just want to talk to you guys more. And we also know that men have been way cut off at the knees a lot of times too. And sometimes you've said the wrong things. We're going to get to that. But I want to. Linda, do you have something to go?
I just wanted to say a couple. If men don't want to listen to you, that's all right. Just go off and do your thing. And sometimes you're going to get the better thing, because a lot of times, and we love men. I grew up without a father, so I never had any idea what men were really like. And so I didn't have any presuppositions about it, which perhaps was lucky, but I grew up with the right mother, who was a very strong woman. But I did say something. I asked a young woman recently a question, and it came back to me that she thought I was extremely old-fashioned. And the question that I asked her had very much to do with how you present yourself to people. Right, baby? And
Hey, Roxy, she's 7.5.
yeah. And she took it entirely wrong, and it came back to me through many, many cycles. And then that woman wanted me to be her mentor, and there was no way. But how you present yourself, how you behave, always keep the upper hand. We're up here, we're goddesses, so behave like one. You know, we're like, nothing's gonna happen in this world without us. So we just haven't owned that in a way. And if somebody's in your way, find a way to go around them. I've found so often ways to go around anything that stops me. And I don't have to be rough or insulting or fight about it. It's not how I want to be. But there's always a way around it.
Linda has something to say.
I totally agree with you. But I also think it's about like the structure in society, and we're still like underrepresented on like photojournalists, and I really think we have to look at, for example, why are there so many women in the school, like in the art school or photography school, and why is it still so male dominated? And I think, for example, like when female gets children or the family, we tend to take more responsibility, and the man can go out working. So we also have to kind of look at the structures, because we really need more women out there.
I think it's useful to examine some of the reasons that happens, and certainly not to excuse them, actually to be really hard on them. And I think some of it's what you're saying. I think also, just to call it for what it is. So women go through and they get the same education, and often they are even more represented in the educational setting. And then you go out into the real world and it's like we all fall away. And what happens with that? So some of it is that, you will always, when you look at a group of people and there's a mixture of men and women, it is quite common that people will just always assume that the men around you can do the better job. It's just part of what happens. And when you are, and this is why, numbers do matter, which is that like, when there are so many men to choose from and there's only one or two women, that will just happen again and again and again, because it will always be, well, this guy can do it better than her, and that guy can do it better than her, and this guy can do it better than her. And so like coming up with larger numbers and larger representation means that's just, it's less likely to happen. It also becomes just much more blatant, because like when it's just the one girl that doesn't get the assignment or the one girl that doesn't have the opportunity, it's easy to overlook it. When it's 7 of us and you can look at numbers and say, wait, she hasn't gotten it and she hasn't gotten it, it's just easier to call out. And so it's kind of like you start collecting an army that just makes sure that it's not as easy to get away with.
Could I just add one story? Absolutely. Okay. So recently, perhaps a few months ago, there was a big story about Silicon Valley in the United States, where all the tech stuff happens, in case you don't know about that. And it was how women were discriminated against. It was in the New York Times. It was a big investigative piece. So they decided they wanted to photograph the women, and lo and behold, who did they send but a man? And so there was a lot of conversation on Facebook and online about this. It's a story about discrimination against women. And it was written by a woman, and then they sent a man to photograph the women. So everybody was fussing about it, blah, 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 blah. So I thought, why is everybody fussing? Just pick up the telephone and call the New York Times and find out why. Well, I happen to know the people at the New York Times, so I can do that. It's easier for me, right? Because if one of you tried to do it, it's much harder, right? You don't even know who to ask for. But I thought, well, let me get to the bottom of it, because I think, I'm not afraid. Anyway, so I called the deputy director of photography, and I said, you know, this happened, and I just thought you might want to know that there's an awful lot of conversation going on by women about why you would do this story, that the subjects are women, and why you would send a man when there were some really excellent photographers in California that are women that you could use. And she said, I'm shocked to hear that. And I said, you do look at your own paper, right? And she said, I'm going to call you back, Maggie. So she went to that department, and lo and behold, the photo editors were women. And so she said, do you understand why, you know, why did you send men? And they said, we didn't even think about it.
But that's exactly
Wow.
But
yeah.
that's
wow.
to underline your story.
Everything.
Yeah, they didn't even, it's just like, oh, let's send who we think is the best photographer, but they didn't even look at women. And that's why that happens sometimes. So
Thank you for that
insight on that. Nichole,
Well, just to add on to that, I mean, I think that there's different levels of this. There's violence and direct harassment and attacks and the sort of conscious biases that exist and can be incredibly destructive. But there's also the subconscious biases where this has just been the way that things are, and people are used to them and they're familiar with them and it's comfortable. And that's why these conversations and this movement is so important. Because, I mean, Maggie, Sarah, you guys have fought so many battles, which is part of why we are here today, and Jessica, and so many incredible women out there. And, you know, there's nothing but gratitude for that. But the movement has to keep moving forward, because it's not just the conscious biases, it's the subconscious biases. And we are all far too comfortable with the status quo. And so to really push this in the direction it needs to go, we have to challenge every single one of those questions. The hiring practices, the men and women, and the balances on juries and agencies and staff on newspapers and magazines. And until there's a better sense of equality, you know, this conversation is not over.
I want to jump in here on one thing. We've glossed over a few things here. A few times, this one kind of elephant in the room, which we all have talked about, frankly, and women do talk about this among themselves online. It's the role of women photo editors in not hiring women photographers. Maggie just gave us the anecdote. Jess has touched on it. Everybody kind of touched on it, and then we went on, because this conversation is so big, to other things. I moved from writing into photography almost 20 years ago, and boy, was I conscious of the women who had their coterie of conflict photographers around them, who flirted with them, who I saw sexually harass them. I saw these women editors inappropriately touch men, and the men could do nothing about it, or felt they could, because they had contracts with these women. So I know this has been brought up sometimes in a Facebook discussion by a man saying, but wait a minute, you guys are taking down the patriarchy. What about women who haven't taken care of women? And they have been dumped on in those conversations. Again, social media does not move us into the spaces of understanding. But I understand also why that's not the comment for a man to make right now. We as women need to say among ourselves, hold on, for you women who've been in the patriarchy, maybe you haven't broken that glass ceiling yet. I mentioned this to one young woman. I'm like, are we ever going to really talk about the women photo editors who forever have only hired men? And any woman in this industry can name those women, which isn't the point of our conversation tonight, but we know. And this younger woman's response was, oh, but they haven't benefited from the patriarchy. And I stopped and I said, oh, really? They had full-time salaries, they had benefits, they had paid vacations. They benefited from that patriarchy. Maybe they don't run the patriarchy, but they benefited, and they didn't open the door for somebody else. So, Ilvy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I don't mean like, what's your opinion, but we've been talking about it. Because if we're going to move this conversation forward, I mean, Madeleine Albright, the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, said there is a special place in hell reserved for women who don't help other women. We are mindful of that, and we are committed to helping other women. But go on. Yeah.
Well, if that's true, I think it's going to be quite a busy place out there, because I really, I'm very lucky actually. I'm based in the Netherlands, and I have a great female photo editor at my newspaper in the Netherlands that is really good at hiring women. But in the international scene, I don't think I've ever, never actually, gotten any assignment from a woman. And what I've also noticed, it's quite difficult. I always have the feeling it has something, maybe, I'm not sure, maybe it has to do something about jealousy or something. It's like the women up there don't want to give you the assignments because, I don't know why, but it could be fear as well. Because they know their male colleagues might do a better job, or they might think they do a better job.
I think
so. There's a forgiveness word there that they know male colleagues would do a better job. You don't mean it that? Yeah. But this is.
I'm thinking that's like because it's been such a. All these guys have been taking these assignments for so many years. I just have the feeling that, they might think that they would do a better job.
But that's part of the point, and it's what I'm speaking about earlier, is that, like, there is always that assumption, and while I am very frustrated and angry in some situations at the women photo editors who have perpetuated some of this behavior, I also I just get it, because when everyone, I'm not just saying that men think that men do it better, women think that men do it better too. Watch how we trip over each other, allowing men to get ahead. There is a cultural practice that's not just directed at us, that we all kind of participate. So when everyone thinks that men do a better job, men will get more of the jobs. And it's trying, and this also does not, and this goes without saying, this is not just about a gender here. This is about inclusion. When everyone assumes that white people do it better than any other minority, that's also what happens. When everyone assumes that straight people, absolutely, and so this is about being much more inclusionary and taking risks, and also recognizing that we all kind of perpetuate these ideas.
Yeah. And
can we stop for just 1 second? What time are we at? We want to open the conversation. Do you guys eventually? Where are we, Vero, in terms of time? Oh, wow. So we should be wrapping up we wanted to give a half an hour to talk with you guys. So, we're gonna steal some of your time. Mike, sorry, I need whatever. I will repeat that for the purposes of streaming and recording. We have reached the point in time where we should be opening the conversation to you. We're not going to do that yet, because we can. We're the women controlling the conversation here. Ilvy.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. We haven't opened up the discussion yet, so I don't know what this room is going to look like in 20 minutes' time. But I do think what's going wrong in a very, what's going wrong on the internet, you mentioned it a little bit, is that the conversations, I think a lot of women and men just keep attacking each other online about this subject. And it's not a conversation if you just attack each other constantly, and it kills what we're actually, it actually kills the discussion that we are having now, and hopefully in a couple of minutes with all of you. Sometimes you just see discussions that start off in a really good way, and then someone just slams the door basically to this discussion. And I think that's such a waste on the side of men and women who are trying to talk about this but haven't found the right way. And I think a lot of that is because we're not listening, actually. We're not listening to each other.
Yeah, and one of the solutions to that, to both men and women, I think, is empathy, to try to understand the other's point of view, as difficult as it may seem, because a lot of women right now feel at a point when they feel like attacking, when they feel like grabbing these guys and like, we're not going to listen to your, to what you have to say. So it's not easy at this point to be emphatic, to be like, I feel, let's listen to each other. But as hard as it may seem, this is the way for a conversation for both sides, because it hasn't been easy for anybody, and yes, it's been more difficult for women, obviously, but it doesn't mean that we have to be attackers. It doesn't mean that we cannot listen either. Mm-hmm.
Just a really, really quick add-on to that, because I agree with what you both said. I think a lot of this has to do with questioning your privilege, and there's a lot of different forms of privilege, and thinking about how you can pay it forward to people who have less opportunities than you. And that's something that we all need to be doing, but it's certainly a gendered question as well. And I think that, on the other side of that, there's no loss in doing this. If we do this, if we work together and this conversation moves forward, we all benefit. We benefit from having richer, more diverse, more, complex stories out there, and we all get to understand this messy world that we share a little bit more. So I want to say that.
So, I want you to, yes, absolutely. I want everybody who has something to say it, and then I didn't tell you guys, but a last question occurred to me that I'm going to give to each of you. So and then we'll open it up.
I mentor a lot of people, both men and women, all over the world, people I don't even know. And they reach out to me because I love looking at photographs, first of all. I'm a picture editor at heart, actually. And I really love it, and I think it's so hard to get your work seen. And so I'm willing to look at it. And but what I've learned is that women are afraid to show their work, because I'll spend time editing it, sequencing it, making some suggestions, who they might show it to. Men are fearless. They're not afraid. But women so many times have been afraid to show the work, even after we sort of collect it and get it together, and I'm making suggestions about who should see it. I even give them names. And I always say, well, what's the problem? I mean, they're not going to shoot you at dawn. They just might not say yes, but they're all almost always afraid to show their work. Either that, or they have tried to show it, especially foreign women not in the United States. And so I mentor mostly women outside of the United States, because I think they are the ones who have the hardest time connecting. And they're different cultures, and so I'm very invigorated by seeing what they do to show their cultures. But I think women have a voice. We all have, every one of you beautiful women in this room have a voice, and you need to use it. And there's different ways to use it. But be the warrior for your work. Men should be this way as well, but I think they tend to be that way more. So we have to believe in our work, and the one thing I would ask you to remember is this: people let you into their lives, you tell their stories, you have to be the warrior for them. Be the warrior for your work. If you believe in it, if you work that hard for it, be the warrior. And I have to tell you, if you get that idea into your head, that of a warrior, and I'm not talking about people who go and shoot each other. If you know anything about the warrior culture, it is a very remarkable way of thinking and living your life. And now I'm not going to get new agey on you, but I'm Native American, a quarter, and if you read about what that warrior is, or the history of warriors in any culture, it's not about war. It's about something much bigger and more extraordinary. So just keep that in mind. You have a voice. Don't be afraid. The worst that anybody can do is tell you no. I had a little personal project I did, and I showed it to 13 magazines, and they all loved it. Oh, we love it, Maggie, but we just don't know what to do with it. And even when I would say, well, how about this and this and this and this? And they say, well, the editor says no. So I was going to put it away, and I thought, damn it, I never say die. So I took it to one more magazine, and damn, if they didn't just go nuts for it. And they gave me an assignment to do it the next the next season. And on the basis of that, they sent me, it was a fashion story. It was about behind the scenes at the fashion shows. And I wrote these captions. By the way, this is why captions are so important. Very giddy, kind of gay captions. Gotta get there, gotta get something in about captions. Because I'm the caption queen, honey. And and very gay, very giddy, very like put you there behind the scenes, you know, very, you know, Bill Blass is smoking a cigarette as he straightens Iman's. Just very gossipy. They put all of that together and did a sidebar, and on the basis of that, they sent me to Japan for a month to write and interview and photograph all the top Japanese designers. Now, who would have thought a little girl from Texas could do that? But it's because I didn't give up. And sometimes you just have to show it just one more time, just one more time. And so this is having faith in yourself. So I think sometimes we're not confident enough. So be confident.
I experience the same when I teach, that often female like are insecure about themselves. But I think if we look at this in a feminist perspective, it has been taking women longer to really have the same rights as men. So I think it's kind of something that are still stuck with us. And like, for example, if you see people that's starting a business, it's like 80% men is like, oh, we're going to start straight away. And it's a few females, but they often do better because they've really been thinking about it and like have a lot of thoughts around it. So we have like projects that often are like really are well done. So we really need to take the confidence back and believe in ourselves and really like go out there and fight.
Quick, well, I'm going to bring him around for a closing, unless do you really need to?
Just very short.
Okay.
It's that thing of I'm not good enough, I'm not interesting enough, not creative enough, not original enough, and this is the moment when every woman should say, I am enough, and be done with it and move forward.
So this will be our last short answer round for everybody. First, I want to say this, and I'm speaking for all of us, and if I'm out of line, you all can correct me, but we appreciate that you are here tonight and that you not only have listened, but we hope that you have heard, because there's a difference. Being heard means that you're at the beginning of understanding and empathy. You have heard generational voices, regional voices, any number of ways of talking about this issue. You've heard critique of the patriarchy, encouragement of individual effort. All too often the conversation gets siloed into only one of those things, and people aren't heard. I hope this diversity among us and what we've expressed can, is an example of the ways that need to be discussed. What Ilvy said is what we also understand is what we're looking how to bring men and into the conversation, and of course expanding, as Jess has so eloquently said, beyond gender to race to class to other things. But we're in a space of imagination right now. Nobody knows how it happens or what changes. So I'm going to ask, before we open it for your comments, I'm going to ask each woman here. The premises of our panel is what next. So I would like to hear from each of you, in your ideal world, what's next in this issue of the patriarchy and women and Me Too? Like, just a thought or two, and take your time. You can rate whoever was ready to say it. Okay, go for it. We'll do it.
Okay. I feel like, what's next is like, it's very good to have these conversations, but in order for things to be actualized, like, there just need to be some tighter rules. And I would love to see in corners of not only this industry, but others, that like, it becomes not a wish and not something that like, oh, wouldn't it be so great? But like, you have to do it. You're not allowed to give this assignment, you're not allowed to do this project unless there are X amount of women, there are X amount of minorities, or just like I would love to see it get more formalized, because we haven't been able to police ourselves. It hasn't worked, and so I'd love for some rules to kind of come along and reinforce that.
No more thoughts and prayers?
No.
Anush, you were ready to go next?
Sure, I can do it. So probably like two things come to my mind when I think of what's next, and they are, so as I said, being confident, knowing for sure that you are enough, and being so confident that you can be emphatic to those who could try to put you down. Being able to stand on your feet to that extent. That's one. And second thing that should be next is women empowering other women. And that's very important. That's the first step. It's been happening, and there should be more of that.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to focus on the empowering as well, because I think when you're talking about empowering not only from women or woman to woman, but also from man to women, we always think we're not getting enough. It's like there's always someone that's like below you, someone that's not getting the assignments that you are getting. I've, in the Netherlands especially, been very, very privileged to get a lot of assignments, but I think sometimes it's good to kind of move over to maybe like have a mentee and teach him or her the things that you've learned, or you know, there are lots of ways to give other people a chance, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're not getting anything, not any share of that. You know, you're all everyone grows when you're sharing, I think. So
yeah, I mean, I agree with what everyone's saying, and we are warriors and we are enough, but we are also trying to do our best work and grow in a structure that very often works against us. And so I think I want to see pragmatic, meaningful, actionable solutions that, you know, make it not so hard or make you not have to be so extraordinary just to get the same, you know, opportunities that are handed out to others. So, you know, I want to see action.
So Linda and Maggie, what's your next step? And I'll take the last one.
You know, I agree totally with the other ones, and really to take action. And I think it should be like a rule to have like equal amount of editors and people in the jury should be equal. When you're giving out ground, it should be like half women, half men, and really, really look at it and take action.
I'm really anxious to see more minorities, and that interests me a great deal. And minorities can be described in a number of different ways, like not just racial minorities, but well, in a number of different ways. So that's kind of my thing, to look for that. And I would just want to reiterate again that sometimes you think you don't have a voice. Can I just tell one quick story? Okay, I know I'm in trouble. Okay. I
can give you a dirty look.
I wrote a letter. So I'm a nominator for the masterclass at World Press. And I've nominated a black photographer 4 times, and he's never gotten in. And I thought his work was extraordinary. So I wrote a letter, an email to the masterclass people, and I said, so who are all these judges that seem to only choose people from the West for the most part? And I've taught at the masterclass as well. And anyway, I kind of, in a very nice way, let them have it. And so they wrote back and invited me to be a judge. So I'm only telling you this story because I made my opinion known in a nice professional way, but that I said, I don't trust World Press anymore. I've lost confidence in you. And that's why I never submit anything. But the masterclass should be made up of every hue and color, every gender, from people all over the world. And it's not always. It's always becomes privileged people. And you need to do a better job. So now I have to be a judge. But gosh, I'm so excited I can hardly sleep. So just all of that again, just to say, speak out. Speak out. You have a voice. Use it. You can be really polite and professional, but use it.
So I get the last word because I'm the moderator, and I would say that it's so great having the power spot. No, it's that there are so many conversations that are waiting to happen. There are people who've been quiet and stayed on the sidelines. That includes men. It includes generational differences because they haven't felt ready or time or they've been jumped on. those conversations need to come. And my hope, what I would want to see, what next, is that every single time somebody has a conversation about that, you leave that conversation saying, did I hear that person? Was I heard? Or did I just listen while I was trying to think of a snappy response or argue my point of view? Did I hear? Because I think that's going to be the basis for conversations going forward. And the 7 of 7, that's sort of, we could go on for hours, obviously, but, and I know we're maybe running late, but we'd like to open it up for anybody who wants to have a comment or to ask a question. That microphone, yeah, Maggie, if you can.
We leverage. I just wanted to say I don't have no experience with photojournalistic world, but I have worked for a couple of years in IT company, and I was hiring people. And I want to say that, for example, for me, what Maggie says, it's something that responds to me, because it's also a man's world, and it's also a greater world. And as for boys who were working in our company, they would love to see more girls there. They would really love to see more girls. But it was a problem not of the boys, but of the girls who were not coming, or when they came, they asked for a half of the salary just because they were not confident in themselves, and they had the experience, they could ask for more. And it's not like that we wouldn't give them, because I was HR, so I would say I wouldn't give them the higher salary, or they wouldn't get the job. But it was their problem not asking for more, or for them also not asking for the higher position or anything. They just didn't came, and I felt as HR that it's a problem of girls, not the boys in the company. So I think the whole conversation for me there was starting with talking to women than talking to men.
An example of a diversity of point of view. Does anybody? This is for you guys to talk. I don't think we need to. If it's okay, not answer back.
Story about tech.
It is.
Companies.
It is.
Not enough women are applying for those jobs.
Maggie's just repeating that it is a big, important story in tech, which it is, that not enough women are applying. But I hope way back there, men, like any men, don't be afraid. Any comments, questions?
You weren't on mine. I haven't slept for 24 hours.
Go ahead. Is anybody? Oh, come on. Okay, wait a minute. Give me a brave man in this room who has something to say. You are out there. I know that. I saw a hand go up. Was that your hand? I saw a man's hand go up. No? It can be a woman too. I just want to know if anybody's got anything to say. Can the mic reach you, or how do we? Or maybe you can stand up and come this closer.
Okay, thank you. Because you said a man, so I hide my hand.
Sorry.
No worry. I'm from Poland, and as a country, so far we had not this female revolution. But nowadays it's happening. It's a lot of demonstration. It's just because economic situation. Before it was no place for this kind of social changes, and finally is done. I'm very happy about that. But what I want to say is probably the problem is always about good examples, like other
old examples.
Good examples.
Good examples. Sorry.
Like it's easier when we have other women who are showing us that we can be brave and powerful, and it's always about that. So I'm happy that I'm here because you are showing that. So maybe you are not the first in the world. I'm sorry, but anyway.
What? We're not the very first to say this? I am shocked. This is done.
I'm sorry.
I'm teasing
it was
you.
very unpolite.
No, it's a safe space. Say
Yeah,
it.
yeah. No, please. And sorry. Anyway, I think you are very good examples for women's, and I just want to say that because it's important for me, especially as I'm from the country where So far, it was no place for this kind of conversation. Now we are discussing a lot, but it's something new. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? A question, a comment, a story? There's no question. Jonathan!
As a man, I think the things that kind of resonated most with me was about the kind of appeal for diversity. I mean, I'm a man, I'm white, I'm middle class, I'm privileged, but I'm not terribly tall, you know? In England we say so. I'm vertically challenged. And there are times in my life when I kind of feel as if, I'm in a slightly weaker position than most men because of that. It's just something going on in my head. But, there's this kind of quest for, what Maggie said about minorities and so on. I think that, as a man, kind of resonated best with me. And I'm not saying I've got a big problem about my height, but that diversity issue is really strong. The wider the range of viewpoints that we have and different experiences that we can share as well, which is a great point, I think the better for all of us. Yeah?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That was very brave and nice. Thank you. Thank you.
Thomas. One of our brothers.
Yep. I just wanted to say that I wish that I had been born in a world that was already equal, an equal world, but I'm so proud to be with people that are bringing us closer to that goal. So thank you.
Thank you. For the camera, Maggie is saying there's no question too small or not worth saying to say it. Thank you, Thomas.
My name is Lakshmi. I'm from here, from Barcelona. I was photojournalist 12 years ago, and I decided to finish because I have a family. I get pregnant. So I have a friend nowadays that she continue making photojournalist. She's a world photographer. And we always discuss. I say yes. She always says me. I take photos like a human person, not like a female. And I always discuss her. No, but you have to use your powerful and your contacts and to move in daily life. No, for example, hospitals and how they say, daily life. And I want to ask you, when you take photos like a female or like a human person?
That's okay. Yeah. Jessica, this is going to you first because you've been bringing up the point of what women bring to it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is an individual thing. I mean, I don't believe, me personally, I don't believe when people say that they don't see race, because I think that they do. I don't believe that people, when they say they don't see color, I believe that they do. They know how to stop at the stoplight. They definitely see color. When it's there, they see it. And so for me personally, like I think I take pictures as a woman. It doesn't mean that I can't have some empathy and some shifts in ways of seeing. I do stories that are about my own experiences, and I do stories that are about other people's experiences, but I'm always situated in the context from which I come. And so I think I'm always photographing as a female.
I mean, just because of time, I'm see we're running a bit out of time. I'm curious, among us, to raise your hands. Who sees like a woman when you're making a photograph? Who feels that? Wait. Okay, so we all sorry, hello, and the whole audience. If as a woman, are you making photographs and you know you're seeing as a woman? Oh, higher hands! Come on, this is a warrior women. Get them up there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm just, yeah, no, Anush was first.
Just something very short, and then I hand it to you. I don't only work and see things as a woman. I also very, very often work and see things as a mother. And I don't know if it connects to Jessica because or Linda, but because we cannot not do that, and it only benefits, and there's no issue about that. As a human, sure, as a woman, as a mother, everything that we can give out of what we have, we should give. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I might get in trouble for saying this. So, okay, so I've recently done an assignment that had to do with children and babies. And today I found out that also a male colleague was asked for this same assignment, but he didn't get it because he's a man. And I think that's, you know, I photograph as a woman, but I really truly believe that there are, if you're a man, you can also photograph babies, and it's not that I want all the female, I don't want to just photograph babies and children, and I think men can do the exact same assignments. Did I get in trouble? No. You've got people who want to okay.
Wait, Nichole was first.
No, just very quickly adding on to that. Women can photograph war, men can photograph babies. It's not about the topic, it's about all having opportunities to be out there telling stories.
The reason I mention it is because I felt it was very unfair, actually. I think it's super unfair to get an assignment or to not get it just because of your gender. I mean, that's what we've been discussing, but that also goes the other way around.
It's complicated, remember that.
Yeah, because I think it's important that we, like, photographing like a woman doesn't mean photographing like typical female areas always. Like, it's just the perspective from me as a woman, and that could be in a war situation, or this could be in any kind of male-dominated situation. I hate photographing babies. I never liked it.
And we do, we get those, and sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not, but we get those types of stories often, like, oh, well, we needed a female director for this. We needed a female photographer, and I always get like all excited of like, oh, what did they need this female director for? Because it's like a really great opportunity, or like it's some really special story, and often it comes down to like, oh, no, because it's someone giving birth, and you're like, oh, okay. I was hoping you would say I needed a female director because it's something that we believe a female can do, not just like it's her territory. Not that there's anything.
I just want to say one thing on that. Sometimes when people have asked me, do I think that I see differently as a woman? And I don't mean to be self-referential on this, but I will say in my life where I feel I've lived the largest womanhood that I can has been in creating the Aftermath Project. I do think it took a woman, I don't think it's only women who feel this, but I think it took a woman's sensibility in the height of sort of post 9/11 wars, with wars being covered, wars being the stories, wars being the awards. I was like, but wait, war is only half the story. Yeah, I agree. I think that came from a woman's perspective. I agree. It didn't have to be me, but I think it was a woman who said, oh my God, are you kidding me? You don't think it's newsworthy that people have to learn how to live again? That somebody has to rebuild. Somebody's got to go home to the place that they were cleansed from. Somebody's got to figure out how to put the pieces together. Somebody's got to build that damn civil society again so that we can live. I think that's a woman's perspective. And I know men agree with it, because the moment you say it, like, we have had many male grant winners from the Aftermath Project who articulated it beautifully, but I don't think that the patriarchy or the average male sensibility would have said, wow, we're missing half the story. It's kind of like women being half the story as well. But sorry, had to jump on that. Back there, Daniel? Daniel, do you want to talk? Oh, this is a treat. Hang on, we're going to hear Daniel, and then Daniel, you're such a gentleman. Oh, is that Mushka? Great. So Daniel and Mushka. Daniel is also a new member of Seven, an emeritus member, one of our brothers. Is the mic there, or should I? Okay.
Well, I almost forgot my question now on the way here. Men are not perfect, you know. Well, I just wanted to say that sometimes, you know, you need, as a man who, you know, we all pursue our careers and, you know, put one brick on the wall and the next one, and then, you know, we stand on it and we're heroes. So sometimes it needs just encounters and somebody, and you want to brag with all your deeds and what you did and how successful and all the missions you completed. And it has worked for years and decades and several decades. And usually men, they say, great, you know, so bragging. Then all of a sudden you meet a woman and she says, I'm not interested in your deeds. Were you happy while you did it? You know, and then you say, that's an interesting question. You know, sometimes it's all sheer luck which make you realize that you need to revise your view on yourself and the world and everything. And men should not forget that, I don't know in percentage, but a large part of the world we are excluded from. And by taking pictures of Kalashnikov-toting men, we solidify the image of male-dominated worlds, and we do not widen the perception of a world. I never learned more about this
Daniel,
world.
Back the mic off just a little bit because it's distorting.
Okay.
There you go.
I never learned more about this secluded world from where I have no entry while traveling through Afghanistan with my first mentee. She told me things, you know, which are totally excluded from me, and she didn't take picture, but she put my pictures in a context. So, yeah.
Can I say, don't go away, I just want to explain a little bit more. We had an early conversation, an email conversation about, you don't have to give the mic away, Daniel, but about the issue of societies where men can't photograph women. And that's, to elucidate, that's what Daniel's referring to. He wrote this most beautiful poetic email about remembering his nights in the Kush, you know, with the women, you know, life was with the women, and he couldn't go there. Yeah, am I saying that right? Microphone? Microphone?
Yeah. In the men's room, they were smoking dope. I had to go have a leak in the, climb the hill, not fall up, and there was sound of dancing and singing from the room, and the men were just, you know, in their paradise, from which in the morning they would wake up with, you know, no enlightenment. So that was a striking example.
Thank you. Thanks. Mushka, yeah, where are you, Mushka? I just have to say, don't you love that longing to women, and maybe men, you can learn about something we love, but the longing of a man to understand a woman's world, like that's the beauty to me in Daniel and the way he represented that moment to all of us and is sharing it again now. A man who longed for a woman's world. Like, wow, how often does that get said?
That's because we're mysterious creatures.
Mushka.
Oh, there I'm here. First of all, I wanted to say I'm very happy for Seven, because I was here in Barcelona for 7 AGM and workshop 2 years ago, and they were talking about adding more women voices, and they made it finally with these wonderful women. But I had this question when you were talking about this editor that hired a male photographer to photograph a story about women. I was thinking, when we say a man, not a man can't photograph women, but when we say what they needed to hire a female photographer for a story about women, isn't that sexism itself? Like, shouldn't we photograph men? Like, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes we are trying to, with that building a line, or like putting a wall, we are doing the sexism ourselves unconsciously.
Thank you so much for highlighting the complicated conversation, right? I'm just going to toss out, and anybody else who wants to answer, it's the idea that that story in the Silicon Valley was about harassment of women and women not being heard and how women were represented. And the New York Times made a decision that a man would represent the woman visually in that story. There was a woman writer, but like, that's a powerful decision. We're not saying, only hire women to shoot babies or only hire men to do that. But there's a thought process that happens, right? Like, who can understand this story? What's appropriate? Sorry to hog that. Maggie, you ready?
Well, actually, Mushka, I totally agree with you, because the one thing I do think about this, because I've been a picture editor and a director of photography before, and I hate to say this maybe, but picture editors are under enormous pressure to hire the people who they think will do the best job. It's a pity that these were younger women photo editors. It hadn't even occurred to them that maybe this was the right thing to do. Let's give some very good women photographers a chance. Then it'll be like a whole woman thing, which could be very exciting. But I think we all have to remember this. Before we're men or women, we have to be good photographers. And people and picture editors, and nobody really understands the role of a picture editor and the pressure they're under until you have been one. And they have to deliver. And so they're always going to go, I won't say always, but they're quite often going to go for who they think will do the best job. And just sometimes that's a man, but in this case, I don't think it was. And there was a missed opportunity. But I agree with you that we have to be careful not to have the reverse discrimination, because, and then I'm just going to say one more thing that's probably going to get rotten tomatoes thrown at me, but I would say this. Oh, Maggie, are you sure? Right now, well, maybe I shouldn't say it. Well, okay.
Your choice. Say it if you want.
Okay. I feel like with all of this discussion, this terribly important discussion that goes beyond men and women and really also takes into consideration race and gender issues, I feel like in the United States, I'm going to get creamed for this, there's a lot of hysteria. And I'm very disappointed in some younger women photographers who are always talking about things that have only to do with white privilege. I don't understand why they're not talking about Indian women in India who are photographers who are getting raped, and why they're not talking about, hey, let me get this Sony camera for a sister in Africa who doesn't have something. And that's where I'm a bit pissed off. And I'm sorry, I don't want to leave a bad taste in anybody's mouth, but if we're going to be sisters, we need to be sisters to each other, and not just, well, you know what I'm saying? We have to support all women, and there are women working under enormously difficult conditions. I'm mentoring a young Iranian woman who gets beaten up physically, not physically, mentally, spiritually, in every way by all her male colleagues. And you know why? Because she's a better photographer. She wins awards, and they just put her down constantly. But I wish that on some of these platforms where we're having these discussions about what's right and wrong, I wish those little sisters were reaching out to the little sisters who are really struggling against danger, against physical danger, against economic issues that they can't even afford a good camera. I mean, we need to love each other and understand that we're not just talking about the people in this room. And that's my one huge disappointment with these conversations we're having. So now you can beat me up in the alley in the back room.
You know, the premise of this conversation here is that we hear each other. You know, whether or not we agree or have differences of opinion, we hear each other. I just want to add, you're up next, but I just want to add a little thing to bring us back to thinking about structure and critiquing the structure, it's all white moment. So for the women photo editors of the New York Times, for decades, it's all male. It's all white male. That's the thought structure that we inherit, that we just take these things on because they're passed down through classrooms, through learned behaviors. And it's why I have so much hope for the women who are having young children now who are going to be raising them differently. But also, Maggie, with what you were saying, that larger structure, it's all white Western women, or with some people of color. I mean, it's like, oh my God, wait a minute. I may think that I'm not, like in my case, I'm not getting those grants, but like, wait a minute, I'm complaining about not getting the assignments. Is there a woman in the world who has less privilege than I do, who I should be thinking about, in breaking this down? It's just keep thinking broader structure. Does that serve what you're saying?
That says it much better than I did.
No, you said it beautifully. For the camera, Maggie said I said it much better than she did. No, it was you. It's a structure that works. I just want to say, I see Ed. Do you want to, are you ready? Ed Cashy?
Well,
there's a no, you need a microphone. I won't get you, but the camera guy will.
No, I think, Maggie, what you're talking about was really more about, on some level, there's no question that we're dealing with thousands of years of gender inequality here, but you're talking about more socioeconomic issues. And I would argue that that is yet another reason why women need more power, and that's why when you educate a woman, the community is better, the family is better, the children are healthier. So I feel it's a sort of step-by-step process, and man, we have such a way to go in the world, right? We're a privileged edge here to even be having this conversation. How many places have we all been where you couldn't even have this conversation? So that's why this is so important, what's happening. You guys lead, all of you lead, and then hopefully we make it better for not only the women of the world, but everyone in the world.
Thank you, Ed. Anush?
I just wanted to add something to Maggie's point about working internationally and paying a lot of attention at what's happening in countries where people have less opportunity, because in those kind of environments, if for women in the West and European countries, in America, it takes confidence a lot of times to do something. For women who live in those countries with less opportunity, it takes double the confidence. It takes double the finance to come and show up to those editors, to have the confidence of showing your work, which you have no idea whether it's ever publishable. So we have to realize that they're on another level where the support needs even a higher boost, and so definitely paying a lot of attention. It kind of covers everything, right? You can pay attention farther, and it covers what's closer as well. I mean, maybe, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thanks, Anush. Does anybody else? We've gone longer than our time, and obviously you know that we are here to be talking and listening to you. And does anybody else want to? Anybody here or anybody in the audience tonight have something more to add? Can you do it on mic?
Just about the question I asked, I wanted to say it's all right. It's a good thing to call it an editor and say, okay, you better to hire a female photographer for a story of harassment of women. But what if we call them and say, how many female photographers did you hire last month or in last 6 months? Not just because of the story or because of the theme, just reminding them of that. And another thing I was thinking about is that, okay, they wanted to hire the best photographer they can, but in a way, if we don't give opportunity to female photographers, not just to mention, okay, female are better in some specific stories, just to hire more female photographers, giving them opportunity, you know, to sometimes kind of like training them better, or like funding them more. Because I had this conversation with friends that, okay, why we have this female grants, or like, why do we need to have only female grants? Because, you know, women need more support, because it costs them more to get to that level. So I don't know, maybe that could be a solution, to just have the equality, other than just, you know, saying that, yeah, let's hire them for this or that.
Thanks for adding on there. I'm just going to toss out one thing that can be done next in terms of finding out how many women photographers have been hired, how many women have had front page photos in newspapers, how many women have been featured in magazines. Why don't you follow Women Photograph on Twitter? There's a monthly breakdown of the percentage of women who are featured in the media. This is something we all can do, men and women. And read those numbers. They're accurate. They are. There's teams of people like reading through newspapers and going, The Guardian, The New York Times, and those numbers are there, and they will shock you every time as you look at them and you go, what? I thought we were making some progress. So for men who, bless your hearts, may still be trying to figure out if you can join the conversation, you know, there's a good step forward to pay attention to that, you know, figure and be able to have a conversation about it. I just want to say, and I realize I may be so too early in the conversation, that there may be women who still like, oh no, I don't want to hear from men. They still need to be, you know, listening to us. It's like, I just so dearly look forward to the space and the moment when the men who have been quiet or got shut down and stopped the conversation will feel safe enough, you know, to come into the circle again. And we'll figure out with you. I mean, in this group, I can't speak for, none of us can speak for all the women in the world who are having this conversation, but we've had enough advanced conversations with ourselves that I can tell you these 7 women, the 7 of 7, we'll walk into that space with you and have that conversation, and we'll hear you, and we'll hope that you'll hear us, and we'll hope that we begin to make change. Thank you.